Chairwoman. Thank you to our witnesses. I appreciate the discussion of an important feature of America's capital markets, frankly, the private ownership of capital. Let's be clear, the owners of the firm aren't the managers. The owners of the firm are the shareholders. And so the shareholders own that capital, and of course they hire the managers collectively to find a return on it. In fact, the return on the invested capital is largely the point of putting the capital at risk. And I guess I'd just like to make the point that when you look at the capital structure, let's go straight to the balance sheet for some of the viewers maybe aren't familiar with the standard assets equal liabilities plus equity. And so the firm might have some cash on the books in a whole host of other assets, but the capital structure is largely comprised of a combination of liabilities and equity, the equity being the shares and the liability potentially being the debt. And right now in the current capital markets, debt capital is far less expensive than equity capital, far less expensive. So if your job as a manager of a firm is to get a return on the invested capital, wouldn't it be rational to use less expensive capital as long as you don't hurt the performance of the firm by over-levering the firm? You know, anyone might find in their own personal household, for example, that some debt might make some sense. Maybe it's okay to have a mortgage on the house, but too much debt creates real risks, right? But if you're in an all-cash position, you're all equity, it's more expensive to operate. You can get a better return on the invested capital. You can certainly get a better return on equity. So, Mr. Coffey, you highlighted that, frankly, at the time people buy shares back, you can't really be sure whether their decision to buy them back is righteous or not. It might make sense for a firm to buy the capital back and lower their cost of capital and put the returns there. And over time, you can see the fruit of that. What do you find is in the data that you've collected under the current rules of the game, the data that you've collected, what is the holding period that you can start to see? Did that share buyback prove to be the right decision by management on behalf of the shareholders or not?
I mean, over the course of our experience, again, we're long-term holders, we're lower turnover. I think, within our first year, we'll be able to start seeing results. The first question that we'll do, and this is important in our process, is we actually go visit management. If you're engaging in a share buyback or any other capital allocation activity we don't agree with, we have a conversation. If we don't see the results showing up in quarterly earnings after a certain period, after we've made our initial investment. Usually after that first year, we're asking, where are the results, and are we making progress? And are there better investment opportunities?
Right, and that's one of the things. When you look, you're buying equities, frankly, correct, right? So when you look at publicly traded companies, there is that pressure. You got to deliver results inside a year, inside a quarter in some cases, right? But some of the capital projects that are out there, depending on the industry, take aerospace or energy, for example, you're not even looking at a positive cash flow event for 5 to 10 years. So you're looking at how do you assess that? And who's in the best place, who's supposed to be in the best place to assess the performance of the firm? Well, the owners are supposed to be. That's why they hire or fire the management. So, Mr. Lewis, as you've highlighted the important functions of share buybacks, I guess that's one thing I hadn't heard as much is the cost of capital and how that affects the performance of the firm. How does that fit with the rest of the analysis that you've provided thus far and the concerns in the publicly traded space for the cost of capital?
So you're right, I didn't actually address the role of using share buybacks to basically optimize your capital structure, but it is one of the important features that the CFO and a CFO, one of the tools they would have at their disposal to try to get to a better mix or better blending of debt and equity financing. And as you point out, debt financing is typically less expensive than equity, largely because interest payments generate a tax shield, and dividend payments to shareholders are not tax deductible at the corporate level. So when you look at the two, there's a natural preference.
Opposite cash flow consequences for the firm. And I think opposite consequences for our economy if we impair the ability of this key part of our capital markets. Thank you. My time's expired.